What's going on, guys? Today I got a bit of a spicy take for you. And what I want to talk about is why I believe that porn is one of the most critical evils in society today, even more so than abortion, and why men, particularly Christian men, must start taking it more seriously. Now, before I get into this, I just got to be upfront that this is a rather nuanced take, and my hope is that you'll actually stick around to understand my core point. And I want to hear what you think about this, but let's start getting into it, all right? First thing is that most Christians would probably say that abortion is the greatest evil in society, and that fundamentally view it as the mass murder of innocent children. And if you want to be deeply spiritual about this, then it's the perspective that it's a form of child sacrifice at the altar of the demon of selfishness, right? Like, it's the same kind of thing as child sacrifice back in the old days, just modernized. It's just like, oh, I'm going to eliminate this life so that my life is better. Generally, I agree with this perspective that, this is horrendously evil and that it's, demonic and dark and bad, and that it's, the worst thing that's happening regularly in our society. But here's my point, is that on a purely tactical battlefield level view, all right, if we're going to just look at the macro perspective of spiritual warfare, I think that particularly for Christian men, our focus should not be on abortion so much as it should be on fighting pornography. Now, it might sound a little strange, maybe like, Mark, why are you trying to shoehorn this point in? But let me make my case, all right? The first reason for this is that the spirit of porn and the spirit of lust, which, porn use is kind of really born from and driven by, is what drives abortion. And to have this make sense, I want to just step back a little bit, because often when people start talking about abortion, the conversation, I think, just happens way too far down the line. It's always about when does life begin, and then all the legal arguments around what's the cutoff date? Is this allowed? Is this thing allowed? Etc. Okay. And I'm not saying those conversations aren't important, but they fail to get to the heart of the abortion issue. And the heart of that issue really is that abortion is caused by a misuse of sex. That's what it is. It's the result of removing sex from the sacred, life-creating context of marriage and reducing sex to a plaything, a means to gratification and pleasure. When you have an abortion, basically what happens is two people, they're coming together for the sake of having sex, and that's it. They don't want a child, right? They're trying to separate sex out from what it naturally is. And in some cases, it's even worse. It's kind of rare, I guess, in the overall scheme of things for what produces an abortion. But sometimes it's even rape. It's just a one-sided thing where someone goes in and all they want is sex for pleasure. When you boil it down, it's all stemming from this desanctification of sexuality, of this, deconstruction of sexuality to its basest, most immediate experience of raw pleasure. And if we didn't have that, if we didn't take sex out of the context of what it really is and what it's meant to be, abortion wouldn't be nearly as big of an issue. Like, if we had a society filled with men who treated their sexuality and their marriages as sacred things tied to God, family, and love, abortion rates would naturally plummet in a dramatic way. And if you look at, the demographics of the people who are, living a more sacred sexuality, there is way, way, way less abortion. But instead, we have a society of men utterly brainwashed, typically since early adolescence, by internet pornography into believing that no strings attached sexual pleasure is the default nature of sexuality. And when guys grow up in that culture, when that becomes the pervasive culture, you're guaranteed going to produce a lot of unwanted children. And that's what leads to abortion. And so if we were to tackle pornography, the thing that the biggest mechanism of this whole demonic psychological conditioning thing out at the knees, well, then we'd be really taking abortion out at the knees. So this is the first big reason I think men should really be focusing in on the evil of pornography. But there's another big reason as well, and I think it's because that is where men have the most agency. Because by the nature of women being the childbearers and ultimately being the ones who decide on having an abortion or not, men simply have less direct leverage on that specific situation than women. But what we do have control over is ourselves. So if a man wishes to exert maximal leverage in the battlefield with evil of abortion and just society at large, he's got to do two things. First, he must develop sexual self-mastery and worldly competence so that he never creates a situation where an abortion may occur or would feel pressure to occur. So like, in other words, he's got to have mastery over his urges, so he's never knocking up a girl in a situation where a child is not wanted. And he's got to be able to stand as a rock solid financial and emotional provider so that his woman never always feels like she's taken care of. And, it removes that pressure for her of like, oh, well, if I have a kid, my whole life will be ruined. If she has a strong man who's there to provide for her, support her, or that kind of thing, it really takes a lot of that out of the picture. And this brings me to the second piece of a man's responsibility in this, is that he has to take this attitude of sexual self-mastery and do his part to promote it as ideal masculine culture. Because today we live in this world where masculine chastity and sexual purity are viewed as unmasculine things, because society, they prop up real men as essentially hedonistic fornicators. That's what it is. It's like, oh yeah, he's the man. He sleeps with all these women. Oh, that makes him cool because, he has all of this, random sex, right? And while I get why that's the case, I think it's fundamentally degenerate. Okay? It's degenerate because a lack of sexual self-control is effeminate and weak. And secondly, it creates a heck of a lot of problems. All right. And, so many guys are bitter today and they view like the slutty, promiscuous woman as, one of the worst examples of societal evil, one of the biggest problems. But if we were going to just do it by the numbers and we were going to compare to, the darkness that a deeply promiscuous woman and a deeply promiscuous man could create, it's no contest. The man can do way, way, way worse. Okay. Like, a woman, for example, could only have so many abortions and neglected children herself. All right. Still horrendous, bad thing. But a man, on the other hand, could essentially father countless unwanted children, and who knows how many of them would turn into abortions. And I know there's men out there like that who are viewed as like these awesome guys when they paid for so many abortions. So basically, there needs to be this call to arms in men where we're brave enough to stand against the sneers, the mockery, and the attacks on the concepts of male sexual purity until it claims its proper place as the cultural ideal. The man who is in control of his sexuality is the only man who could rightfully take his place as a true, benevolent, and good patriarchal force. In any society where a man doesn't have that sense of self-control, it always turns toxic, it always turns degenerate, and the whole thing gets screwed the heck up. I'm going to talk more about this in a future video because I think there's a ton to unpack there, but my hope is that this video has offered you a new perspective on these issues, particularly the idea of porn, and how if you want to really start unleashing your masculine energy in this world in a truly productive way, this is where the battle starts. Okay. And in many ways, it's where the battle ends as well. So if you're feeling more fired up to take removal of your own porn habit more seriously, then I want you to click the link in the description here and get my free training on eliminating porn cravings. This training is specifically designed if you're a busy father or business owner who is using porn as a cope for stress and overwhelm and maybe even a troubled marriage. And so in this training, it's going to show you a simple calendar-based shift for how you can really start taking most of your porn cravings and just reducing them in a very dramatic way. And the training only takes 15 minutes and it's completely free. So all you got to do is click the link in the description to grab it. But otherwise, I would love for you to leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you disagree with, what you do agree with, and anything else you would like to see me talk about more here. So leave a like, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. Ooh, yeah.